A man once said that sometimes a flare goes up, and in that moment you get to see where everybody's standing. And to that I say, what's this sometimes business? In my world, those flares are always going up, and they're illuminating men's souls to me. They're showing me what's under their hood. Whatever the crisis or controversy du jour is, I just sit back and watch how people respond to it. And watching their response tells me what I need to know about them. What do those flares look like? Well, early in this year, how people responded to the 12-day war with Iran. Before that, I suppose it was the election. Before that, it was COVID and George Floyd. And in the last few weeks, it's been the murder of Charlie Kirk or the firing of Jimmy Kimmel. It's in these moments when people respond to these events poorly and often reveal their hypocrisy and their inadequacies. In my world, for better or worse, the sky is lit up like the 4th of July. And if I care to look, I get to see everybody's nakedness. I get to see everyone's hypocrisy on display. Let's talk about Charlie Kirk and his murder. Charlie was an outspoken Christian. Everybody close to him says he was the real deal. An all-around decent guy, nice to everybody. He built an organization called Turning Point USA. Think about that name, Turning Point USA. He was a man who saw his country going in the wrong direction, and he made it his mission to change that. And what would his organization do? Well, they would organize events, and they would do such things as host debates between opposing points of view. And they would hold events at universities. And people would come to see these events, to listen to what he had to say. And he would open up the forum so that people who disagreed with him could ask him questions and challenge his views, and he could respond to it. And they could have a dialogue and try to tease out the truth in a sort of Socratic method, I suppose. And at these events, he was always open and willing to share his faith. And a lot of people, in the wake of his death, want to make it about his politics. His politics don't matter. Charlie invited people to disagree with him. He encouraged them to come up and share their points of view. And many people tried to ask him questions, often baited questions, often accusatory questions, to try to make him look bad. And he would respond with truth and sincerity. So that strategy of his rivals really didn't work on him. If there's one thing you can say about Charlie for sure, he was a very good speaker, very good communicator, very good at engaging with people who disagreed with him. So people would often come up to the microphone he offered them, bent on trying to trap him and make him look foolish and try to defeat him in an open debate. And most of the time, Charlie would prevail and end up making them look foolish, making them look ill-informed, and his responses would often illuminate their presuppositions and the weakness in their view. So when they couldn't prevail against Charlie that way, some of his rivals would try other means. They'd try to get him canceled or shut down, try to disrupt his events. And this has been going on, not just at Charlie, but this has been going on in American universities for decades when opposing views, usually Christian or conservative views, come to campuses. Like, their events are often disrupted. As far back as 2014, I remember watching, because a lot of these interactions are filmed. I remember watching events where, some group would come to speak to their cause, and if it was at all perceived to be against the sort of the woke left's worldview, if it at all challenged that, these events were often, if not disrupted, people would attempt to disrupt them. Someone would pull a fire alarm to disrupt the event. They'd come with air horns to try to drown out the dialogue. And that's if, they couldn't get the event canceled altogether. Like if they throw a stink and tried to lean on their university to cancel speakers coming and speaking to the student body. So all across the country for probably going on a decade now, people have labored to silence viewpoints they don't like in universities. So let's see, his opponents couldn't beat him toe-to-toe. They couldn't come up to a microphone he offered them and challenge him and prevail against him. So they couldn't beat him in debate, in conversation. And they couldn't cancel him anymore. That strategy only worked so well, and it actually emboldened people and just led to the creation of new forums where adults can communicate with one another and wrestle with different ideas and debate different policy decisions, etc. So they couldn't beat him in debate. They couldn't silence him with, through cancel culture or whatever, shouting down his events. They couldn't shut him up that way. So lastly, one of these lunatics who didn't like what Charlie had to say and decided he was going to do something about it, shot him in the neck on a stage in front of thousands of people. And it was filmed, so millions of people got to see this assassination. Not me. I know the footage is out there. I don't wish to see it. So what does that tell me about the side that does that? Well, it tells me how weak they are, how flaccid and incapable they are of defending their own ideas. So much so that when they can't win the debate, when they can't prevail in the conversation, what do? They try to disrupt people. They try to cancel people. And when that doesn't work, the most deranged among them turn to violence. They literally kill people that have opposing views than them. The irony is many of them identify with Antifa, right? And I know this is a couple weeks out, and there's still details about the shooter coming out. But based on what I've heard so far, the shooter identified with Antifa, which, if you don't know, means anti-fascist. Anti-fascist. What do you think fascists were doing in the 20s and 30s? They couldn't prevail in the free exchange of ideas either. So they needed a little help with other means. They would get people canceled. They would form little militant groups and intimidate people into silence. They're the ones who like to burn books because the books said things they didn't like. And if people were to read those books that the fascists didn't like, they might lose control of the conversation. And that's what they fear most of all, is losing control of what people are allowed to talk about. Because their own position, is pretty weak. And lastly, the fascists resorted to wholesale violence. If you started speaking up too much, they would something bad would happen to you, or maybe it would happen to your family, or maybe it would happen to your business. Oh, speaking of which, weren't people just running around burning Teslas because they didn't like what Elon Musk had to say? I wonder how many of those people ironically called themselves Antifa when they behave just like fascists. And that's the illumination, and that's the irony. The people behaving like fascists are the ones running around calling everybody else fascist. So what should I say about Charlie? First of all, I didn't agree with everything Charlie said. I agreed with a lot of it. A lot of it made good sense. And even in the things that I disagreed with him, I still respected his right to come out and give his opinion. That way, at least I can examine it and test my own opinion against it. Because that's how mature minds work. They're looking for the truth. And they're willing to engage with other points of view to try to get to a better understanding of it. And the fact that he was murdered for the crime of having conversations and watching some people, or many people for that matter, gloat about it. They're happy that this happened. That tells me that there is millions and millions of Americans, adults even, who are deeply disturbed. They're behaving like ghouls and vultures, giddy that somebody they disagreed with got shot in the neck while he was trying to have a conversation. And I'll end on a point of agreement that I had with Charlie. Something that we both believed. It came from Matthew chapter 5. Blessed are you when people insult you, persecute you, and falsely say all kinds of evil against you because of me. Rejoice and be glad, because great is your reward in heaven. For in the same way they persecuted the prophets who were before you. Blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Now let's look at Jimmy Kimmel. What sort of man was he? Well, you don't have to wonder, because he's a public figure. Been in the spotlight for decades. He's a crude and obnoxious comedian. Don't believe me? Just go watch any number of seasons from The Man Show. That was before the Me Too movement. And from there, it only got worse. On his late night show. He's one of the most vile, insightful partisans you can imagine. And he's a mouthpiece. He reads lines that are written for him. It's all part of a produced show. I remember just a few years ago when, during COVID, he said that something to the effect that people who didn't get their Fauci ouchie, who didn't get their COVID vaccination shots, if those people got sick, they should just let them die. Why should hospital space be taken up on those kinds of people? People like me, people that were relatively young, healthy, who had no comorbidities, who already had COVID and didn't want to take this experimental shot, which doesn't have any long-term studies on it, against a virus that we've already gotten over. People like me, he said, should just, die if we get sick. We didn't do what the people writing his lines think we should have done. I'm not sure even what Jimmy Kimmel said to get canceled, to get kicked off his show. I don't really care what he said, honestly. In either case, I don't think the government should be canceling anything that someone says. As much as I can't stand Jimmy Kimmel, it's not the job of the FCC to shut him down. Now, if ABC of their own accord decided that Jimmy Kimmel isn't family-friendly entertainment, which clearly hasn't been for decades, and they want to make the decision to cancel his show, if it's the show they own, they can kick off talent that they don't like or don't want in that position. But more so than that, I'm disappointed that the audience hasn't canceled Jimmy Kimmel. How many people tune in and watch this garbage? This vile man who incites people, who disparages huge swaths of Americans because they don't share his political beliefs. And that's what this all is. It's all politics. I mean, Jimmy Kimmel, in The Man Show, he was the crudest, nastiest person towards women. And And it was just so over the top with it. That was the whole theme of the show. Men being pigs and treating women poorly. But he didn't get canceled for that. Where are all these Me Too people when it comes to Jimmy Kimmel? So that just shows you their hypocrisy. See, they don't really care about the sexist stuff. What they really care about is the politics. And as long as you're in their tribe, as long as Jimmy Kimmel's up there making jokes about Trump and his supporters and any conservative position he doesn't like, as long as he agrees on the politics, he can get away with all the sexist stuff. He can get away with the authoritarianism. Saying people like me, people that made the decision not to get the COVID shots, should just die. The hospitals should just not treat us. I mean, clearly these people don't believe in freedom, but he gets a pass from the left on all of that stuff because he doesn't like Trump and he makes jokes about Trump. That said, I'll still defend his right to freedom of speech. The government shouldn't be prohibiting his speech. I don't want the government to cancel Jimmy Kimmel. I want his audience to cancel Jimmy Kimmel, because he shouldn't have an audience, because decent people wouldn't want to listen to that crap. And I guess the hypocrisy that I see from both sides, the left and the right, is their stances on free speech. Now, obviously not everybody. There's definitely right-leaning people that see the value in free speech, and not just when it's speech they like. And there's even some people left on the left that are like that. Not many, it seems, but there's still some people on the political left that believe in free speech. Wish there was more of ya. But this meme points out that hypocrisy beautifully. The left crying about hate speech. And on the other hand, the right crying about flag burning. This is a meme from The Office. So this is Pam from The Office, and she's being asked, what's the difference between these two pictures? And she correctly responds, they're the same picture. Hate speech is just the label you slap on speech you don't like. Opinions you don't think should be allowed to be spoken. Who gets to decide what's hate speech? Flag burning, likewise. I read a quote once that said, I prefer a man that wraps himself in the Constitution and burns the flag. I prefer that man over a man who wraps himself in the flag and burns the Constitution. And I agree with whoever said that quote. I can see an exception for yelling fire in a crowded theater. I could see an exception if you're directly calling for violence. And I can see exceptions for slander and libel, but I think those cases should have to be proved in a court of law. But the exceptions prove the rule, and the rule is free speech. If you're not literally calling for violence, and you're not knowingly damaging people with lies, such as libel, you should get to express any point of view you want. Even flag burning. I think flag burning is disgusting. It's a terrible way to prove whatever point you want to prove, because all you're going to do is piss people off. So it's a form of free speech that's likely to backfire on you. I'll just say that. But I don't care that they're allowed to do it. I don't think making that illegal is going to solve any problem. It's going to create more problems, because now you've set a precedent. You can violate free expression when you don't like what's being expressed. So, barring clear cases of incitement, and incitement isn't just saying an opinion that other people don't like. Incitement is actually directly calling for violence. Barring that, people should be free to say whatever they want. Let the audience decide what they think is hate speech, and they can turn away from it. They don't have to go listen to Charlie Kirk or any other speaker that comes to a campus. If you don't like what he's saying, don't go. The same is true of the right. Just because you don't like the way somebody's expressing themselves, well, so what? Turn away. Don't go to their events where they're burning the American flag. Speak your mind about it. If that makes you feel better, tell them why it's disgusting for them to burn a flag. But what you don't want is an authoritarian government coming in and deciding what things people are allowed to say and what they're not allowed to say. And you would think that would be apparent to both the right and the left, because if you haven't noticed, they flip-flop from time to time. Sometimes this group's in power, sometimes that group's in power. So do you really want the government involved in deciding what you can say, knowing that the side you don't like is likely to be in power again in the near future? So let's end this on a positive note. Charlie, I'm fairly certain, is in heaven. Where are you going?